Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Not Move Fantasy Football Podcast, Week 3. Obviously, it's me, Atrain, and we got Otis breaking down Week 3 of the NFL season. And I'm going to just run down my must starts for this week. Each week, I'm going to try to just run down on certain positions. I'm leaving kickers out. If you ever want to hit on kickers, Otis, you can. Obviously, Aubrey literally carried me in one league.
A weapon, absolute weapon.
And I'm going to change my stance, right, on kickers a little bit because he bailed me out this week in one league anyways.
I think I had over 20-something in two leagues with Aubrey.
Crazy. Yeah. All right, so I'm just going to want to start. Obviously, let's start with quarterbacks. These are my must starts for quarterbacks going into week 3. I think it's going to start off with our big game tomorrow night. I got Josh Allen versus Miami. Josh Allen has been the staple of fantasy football quarterbacks, and I love him this week more than any other week.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong. I mean, he's a must-start any week. Matchups or not, there's no buyer beware here with Josh Allen. He's going to put out points, in the air and on the ground.
The next guy I want to hit on is Patrick Mahomes. I think Patrick Mahomes has a good matchup against the Giants this week. I like Patrick Mahomes to have a good fantasy outing this week.
Yeah, we saw Russell Wilson ball out last week. I don't see why Mahomes isn't a must start this week. Regardless of whether you're 0-2 or not, right? Fantasy football is totally unrelated to that real world real world football. So I don't see why this defense wouldn't let up, 250, 300 yards with Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball.
He's going to have his big weeks, and I feel like Mahomes is due for his big week, and it's going to be this week. Next guy, I'm going to go on a little bit of a stretch here. I'm not going to always go for the big names. Obviously, I hit on Josh Allen. I think obviously we know he's a must start, but a guy that I think can be a sneaky guy to slide in this week is Jared Goff. Obviously, he came off a huge game last week, and I like the matchup against Baltimore, especially it being a primetime game. I think Goff might have a big week this week.
Yeah, and I think Goff, maybe they kind of unlocked something here last week with that offense. I don't know. I didn't watch the game, but I mean, when you are putting up the numbers he did last week, I don't know that he could duplicate that, but getting close to it again is a definite real possibility.
I'm going to have a lot of guys from both of these teams on all of the positions. I really like the Cowboys versus the Bears matchup. And that's why the next guy I'm going to slate in here is going to be Dak Prescott. I feel like Dak is due for a big game. Obviously, he had a pretty good game last week, so I think that he is going to eat that Bears defense alive, and I feel like Dak is a must-start if you have him.
Yeah, I mean, both of those corners are coming off of injury. Back into this is going to be their second week playing together. Dak is ranked number 7 in the ESPN rankings this week, which is 100% warranted in my opinion.
Yep. And then again, like I said, I don't want to just throw big name quarterbacks out there. I want to kind of look at some of like the little bit of a sleeper picks too. Another one I got, and it's coming off another big game. It's going to be Drake May versus the Steelers. I think Drake May could eat this week.
Yeah. I don't know quite how to evaluate the Steelers at this point. Defensively, I think there's still a question mark. So absolutely, Drake May has big time potential. I'm looking to see him really break out here with over 250 yards, passing before we kind of say Drake May's an every week starter.
Right. Like I said,
yeah, those of you guys who have deeper leagues, you're going to get that.
That's why I say like the Jared Goff and Drake May picks here. I'm kind of like I'm not as confident starting them this week, but I feel like they could have a big week this week. I like them. Those are the 5 quarterbacks I like. Is there any guys that I didn't mention that you really like this week in fantasy?
Yeah, so obviously we know about Daniel Jones, a top 10 ranking in the ESPN rankings right now. If you hadn't picked him up, probably already lost a chance on him. But if you don't, have him on your roster and you can get him. Absolutely get him. Also, don't be afraid to pick up Jake Browning if you're a guy who had Joe Burrow, who's obviously down for 3 months now with that toe injury. And then, you know what? I mean, I really don't have a real good opinion of this guy, but starting to win me over this season is Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence put up a pretty good number last week. I wouldn't be afraid to pick him up at the waiver wire if you can.
Okay. Next, I'm going to hit over to the running back position. I'm just going to go in order this way. A guy that I think is a resurgence in fantasy football, and I like what I saw last week, and I think he took over that lead running back role, and that's Kenneth Walker versus the Saints. Obviously, we know the Saints defense is very weak, and I feel like Kenneth Walker is going to eat this week.
Yeah, and Kenneth Walker against that, you got to remember that the Seattle offense is kind of predicated now on the run to get Sam Darnold going. I mean, that's the way his recipe was in Minnesota, with the exception of having a Justin Jefferson, Jackson and Smith and Jigman, not quite Justin Jefferson, but still having a solid impact on that offense. Yeah, I like Kenneth Walker, but the guys at ESPN have him ranked 25th in the running backs this week. I think that it's probably somewhere in the middle. I think I have him top 16. I think 25th is way too low.
And like I said, like a lot of my rankings that I do on this podcast is because of matchup. If a matchup really stands out to me, I'm really going to lean towards that matchup. And I think the Saints defense, it's not stellar, and I think you can definitely eat off that Saints defense. The next two guys are going to be, again, I'm going to hit back on that Cowboys-Bears game. It's going to be both running backs. I think starting Javonte Williams and starting DeAndre Swift are both big starts this week, because I think this is going to be I picture this being a high-scoring game, and I think both teams are going to eat.
Yeah, two top 20 ranked running backs here in the ESPN league. And the thing about Javonte Williams is he's really starting to reemerge and become the guy for the Dallas Cowboys, which I didn't foresee in the beginning of the year. I honestly drafted Jaden Blue in 2 leagues with the full intention of him superseding Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders as the running back. And as a rookie, that would be great for me to have in keeper leagues. And I just dropped them in 2 leagues to pick up other people.
Yep. And like I said, I don't want to just hit when we do these episodes. I don't want to hit on just, obviously, I could say Saquon Barkley every week. Obviously, I could say Bijan every week, right? I kind of want to dig deeper, and I want guys that are based off matchups that could still get you good points. Though, the questions we get during the week, who would you start, this guy or this guy? The other two running backs I like this week is going to be Jalen Warren versus the Patriots.
Yeah,
I like that matchup. And I also like Tony Pollard versus the Colts.
Yeah, Tony Pollard, been a big fan of him since the transition from Dallas to Tennessee. I think that the matchup warrants his play. I think that the Indianapolis defense isn't tremendous, and their offense is pretty much centered around that running back in the backfield for the Tennessee Titans. So when we look at this, right, Cam Ward is a guy they're babying into that offense. So let's just keep feeding Tony Pollard until he gets used to it.
Right. Now I'm going to move over to Is there any other running backs that you really like this week that I didn't hit on?
So a couple guys that are kind of ranked really low that I think are elevating themselves. One is for sure J.K. Dobbins from the Denver Broncos. He seems to be getting a lot more touches than his running back mates in that backfield. And then also, now that Aaron Jones is down, Jordan Mason is going to assume the starting role. And I don't know how, but at this point, to have him so low in their rankings at 22, ESPN, I feel like you should have a little bit more faith in Jordan Mason based on what he did with San Francisco last year.
Yeah, I like both of those, Otis. My givens this week, right? Moving over to wide receivers, and like I said, I'm gonna throw a couple for sure. You're starting no matter what, and then there's
Yeah.
my kind of reaching. So first one, I think Malik Neighbors. It's Malik Neighbors season, and I think from here on out, I think he's gonna eat, and I think he's gonna start by eating that Chiefs defense.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the game from last week with Dallas and New York, right? Neither one of those teams seem to be playing defense. So I don't see Kansas City as some world-beating defense at this point in the season. So I don't feel like Neighbors would be impacted by any means. And he is one of my number one draft picks in a league that I have.
Next guy is a guy that is not coming out of your lineup, and if you've started him the last 2 weeks, he's definitely not coming out of your lineup anytime soon until Chris Godwin comes back, and that's Emeka Ibuka. He's going to be eating that Jets defense up this week.
Yeah, absolutely love Emeka Ibuka, especially for those who are in the keeper dynasty leagues. You won out in the wide receiver position. You're going to have a guy, depending on what your rules are, for at least 4 seasons who's going to ball out for you as long as Baker Mayfield is healthy and able to, pass the football.
Next guy, you're taking a little bit of a shot, but I feel like he's a safe play. That's Roma Dunze versus the Cowboys. Again, I'm hitting back to that Bears-Cowboys. I'm going to be starting anybody that's a Cowboy and anybody that is a Bear, I'm starting in fantasy this week. I love Roma Dunze against the Cowboys. And on the flip side, I love George Pickens going up against that Bears defense.
Yeah, I feel like George Pickens is probably going to be a guy in this particular game who's going to get more of the looks based on the fact that Jalen Johnson is in his second week returning. He's probably going to be on CeeDee Lamb.
All right, my other guy that's going to be a little bit of a stretch. He's a flex play at best sometimes, or wide receiver 3 flex play, and that's going to be your guy, Juwan Jennings. He just came off a huge game. I'm not sold on the Cardinals defense. I love Juwan Jennings this week.
Hey, and listen, shout out to Juwan Jennings and that San Francisco offense, who we did not know we were going to get as a fan. I know I trust in Shanahan, being able to recruit the right quarterbacks, and for his system. We pumped out Jimmy Garoppolo, we pumped out Sam Darnold, and now we have Mac Jones, all who were starting quarterbacks somewhere else, and now have moved on with Mac Jones coming in from New England and Jacksonville. So I really feel like Juwan Jennings is a guy who's completely healthy, ready to go, hit the ground running when he came back.
Any other wide receivers you see eating this week, Otis?
Yeah, so a guy who a lot of people are down on in that Thursday night matchup, I like Tyreek Hill tomorrow. Jalen Waddle is questionable. I just feel like he's going to get more targets. And I also have no problem, putting out T. Higgins against that Minnesota defense with Jamar Chase, typically getting most of the coverage. T. Higgins is a guy who could start in almost every league, unless you have top 5 guys in your fantasy lineup.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of rumblings that Jake Browning is going to be leaning towards T. Higgins this week. We'll find out if it's true or not. But yeah, T. Higgins, I think he is definitely going to start earning that top wide receiver spot because he was drafted high. And, even though Joe Burrow's out, I feel like they're still going to be trying to air that ball out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and we saw that happen last season with Jake Browning. So, I don't, like I said before, when we talked about some guys in the quarterback rankings, I don't have a problem with Jake Browning playing and getting the ball out to T. Higgins here.
Yep. All right. I'm going to move over to tight ends. And this is a guy that I drafted super late, and he has been everything I've wanted and more. Unfortunately, he is throwing a questionable tag this morning. I didn't look quite into the injury because I feel like if it was a big deal, we would have heard more about it. But that's right. Tyler Warren of the Colts versus the Titans. I like Tyler Warren because he has been everything I've wanted in a late pick and more.
Yeah, I like Tyler Warren when the Colts drafted him. I really thought that maybe Anthony Richardson was going to be the starter, but still had a slight feeling, not quite as as confident as our buddy Southgate. Shout out to Southgate. We're always going to shout out him for telling us that Dan Jones is going to ball out this year.
Man,
I
what
thought
a
he was
bold
going to
pick.
be. Yeah, I thought he was going to be a safety blanket though for Anthony Richardson in this Colts offense, but I thought he's the more talented guy than Colston Loveland. And I think that this is a good pickup for this week if you don't have any.
Yeah, that's enough on the Colts. Actually, I'm going to hit on the Colts again, unfortunately. But I think the no-brainer this week is going to be Tucker Kraft going up against the Browns. He looked ridiculous this last outing.
I mean, you called it last week. Shout out to A-Train last week. Put him in his top 5, right? Way to go, boss man. I really liked Tucker Kraft last year, and he didn't quite give me what I needed at the end of the day, but seems to be picking up the offense. And I think that's a real attribute to these receivers they have on that offense that is allowing him to get open. I mean, Matthew Golden didn't produce anything yet last week, but he had 2 long balls that went to him, right? That leaves the middle of the field open for guys like Tucker Kraft.
Yep. And then the next 3 are going to be, again, guys that are a little bit of stretches, guys that you could possibly pick up if you haven't already put a waiver claim. You could still possibly pick up. Again, Cowboys-Bears game. I like Jake Ferguson, the tight end of the Cowboys, against that Bears D.
Yeah, I feel like Jake Ferguson at the about halfway point of that Cowboys-Giants game really started to put some catches together. In succession, he had a couple catches in a row, and then they would throw a ball to one guy or the other and then come right back to Ferguson. So I like Ferguson in this matchup. I also like Zach Ertz this week versus that Las Vegas defense. Zach Ertz has been balling out for what he's been attributed to in his offense, right? Everybody was looking at Terry McLaurin. Everybody's looking at Deebo Samuel. And not that these guys haven't performed, but for him to get the numbers he's putting up, I really like Zach Ertz this week.
All right. The other guys I like are Juwan Johnson versus the Seahawks at tight end. I think he's been a big waiver wire priority through just the last couple of weeks. The production, obviously, he has made a name for himself.
Yeah, his targets have increased since last year tremendously. In the last 2 games of the season so far, he's had more targets than in a 4-stretch combined at the end of last season.
Yep. And then the last guy I'm going to hit on is Harold Fannin Jr. I think you're hearing his name pop up a lot more, and he's taken over that spot. And I think that if you go and take a limb on him, you just go put him on your team. Even if you don't start him, put him on your bench, tuck him away, because he's becoming their clear-cut number 1.
Yeah, hard to believe that they haven't David Njoku on the team with Howard Fannin the way he's producing. And I did, last week recommend that you pick him up. If you haven't picked him up, as A-Train said, please pick him up. He's definitely worth it. I have him in 2 leagues, started in 2 leagues last week. The first week he had 9 to 12, depending on your rules for your fantasy league, 9 to 12 points. Last week, a little bit of a dip, but 7 points is not something to sneeze at.
All right, let's move over to defenses, unless you got any must-start tight ends that you can think of.
Yeah, so I actually we already talked about Fannin, who I thought was a must-start.
Yep, you called that.
I also like your guy, Evan Ingram. He is a questionable this week at this point, but I like Evan Ingram against the Chargers defense. It's kind of like, at some point, it's going to click for Bo Nix. So, if you can get one of those weapons, it's really going to happen.
All right, let's go and see what we got down on defense. All right, so I think that I picked these guys up 2 weeks ago, and I stashed them on my bench. I didn't quite know how they were going to pan out. A lot of times you went with the Eagles defense. You were thinking the Titans defense was going to be stout this year. A lot of people picked the Ravens defense this year. I got them in a few leagues. But the must start of the week on defense, and the most points I think that are going to score this week, is the Packers versus the Browns. I love that matchup.
Yeah, Packers, as a whole, obviously once they upgraded with Micah Parsons and the departure of Kenny Clark. The pass rush has obviously been where they've won games. They've been getting leads, and then the team is becoming one-dimensional who they're playing. And I really like the Packers defense, not just for this week, but if you're not starting them, every week, I probably would question if you were watching football at all.
Yeah, they look stout. The other defensive matchup I really like is the Seattle Seahawks versus the New Orleans Saints. I think the Saints offense is subpar, and I think that Seahawks defense is pretty damn good.
Yeah, I did draft the Seahawks in 2 leagues. I will say this, between the 49ers defense and the Seahawks defense, both of those divisions, both teams in the division are playing the AFC South. And so they're going to feast on those teams, except for probably the Colts. So if you don't have one of those 2 defenses, I know a lot of people are down on the 49ers defense, but understand that their schedule is extremely weak. So you could benefit with specific matchups if you can get them for a week or 2.
Next one is tomorrow night's game. I like that Bills defense versus that struggling Miami offense.
Yeah, I really feel like this is make or break week for Mike McDaniel. And I don't feel like there's warm feelings even after that. So he's really he wasn't one of the guys that when we were talking, football that I said he was on the hot seat. But after these first 2 weeks, my goodness, that offense is absolutely stagnant.
Yeah, they're having players meetings. That's never a good sign.
Right.
Obviously, I'm starting to think they're for real. Give me the Colts defense versus the Tennessee Titans. You got Cam Ward. He's going to be going up against a pretty stout Colts defense. Even though my Denver Broncos ate on that Colts defense, they still looked pretty damn good. I like the Colts this week.
Yeah, I like the Colts as well. I feel like the more that offense is successful, the easier it's going to be for that side of the ball. Much like when we talk about matchups against New Orleans and Chicago, where their offenses are struggling, it's difficult for that defense to be effective.
All right, in my last spot, and I'm probably never, ever, ever for the rest of the season ever going to say this, but give me the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Minnesota Vikings. I would probably start the Vikings defense this week for this reason alone. I don't believe in Carson Wentz. I believe in Jake Browning a lot more than I believe in Carson Wentz. Give me the Bengals defense. Mark this in the pages of time. I am picking the Bengals defense in 2025.
Hey, we're going to timestamp it, right? 10:19 Eastern, 8:19 Central.
So when we come back next week, right? So when we come back next week, we got to see how this plays out, especially this one, because I'm really going on a limb on this one because I never thought I would say start the Bengals defense.
I don't know how you don't. You're right. I didn't believe, to be honest with you, I really didn't believe in JJ McCarthy either. But now that it's Carson Wentz, this guy, listen, I live in the Philadelphia area. I've seen this guy completely have a meltdown from an MVP season. And then the team wins the Super Bowl, but without him, then comes back the next season and is absolutely in shambles. And that's between the ears. That's not even physically. He did have an ACL injury, but between the ears, he was on the struggle bus, and I don't see him changing for anything. He was on the Chiefs before, and they didn't keep him. And I think Andy Reid does a hell of a job with quarterbacks.
So that's saying a lot.
Yeah. Another team that I like in the NFC South the NFC South, is the Falcons against the Carolina Panthers this week. I think
that's a good one.
Yeah, I think that matchup is solid. I saw a lot of pressuring going on from that Atlanta Falcons defense last week, so I really like the defense of the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, that Carolina team is struggling, man. They just does not look good. That the whole offense just does not look good from top to bottom.
And it's unfortunate because it was really, really, kind of positive going into this week.
Yeah.
And to see, into this year with Bryce Young. And to see the output that has happened, it's a shame because I really want to root for guys. I want guys to be successful, right? Like It makes fantasy football fun when you have more guys that are successful and you're scoring 140, 150 points and you're still not winning, right? That's a good thing because the league's doing well as well.
And I know a lot of people that even have Bryce Young as their backup in their leagues because I have him as a backup in one of my leagues. I'm looking elsewhere, and that waiver wire is looking slim, especially with, we look at all the quarterback changes. Mariota might start this week.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a really unstable because of the injuries and, like you said, because of underplay. Like Anthony Richardson losing his starting job was a kind of a surprise, but not a big surprise. But now you're seeing these injuries start to happen, and these guys who are playing are just atrocious.
And it's happening to the quarterback position. We got Mariota possibly playing for JD5. We have Mac Jones playing for Brock Purdy. We have Daniel Jones starting for the Colts. We have Jake Browning starting for the Bengals. Like, this quarterback position is getting thin this year.
Yeah, and it becomes a bidder's war. If you have free agent money bank in your league, as most people do now. Before it was like, man, if you could just get to the waiver wire as quick as possible, you were getting them on waiver wire Wednesday. Now you might have to. There was a person in my league. We have $1,000 free agency bank. He spent $222 to get Jake Browning.
That's crazy.
And
that's crazy.
That's almost a third of his money.
That's crazy.
But when you get a questionable guy as your second quarterback, now you're really in a bind because you don't want to start that guy. That was just a filler, and now you have to start somebody.
So one guy in my work league, right? So he drafted immaculate. I had an A+ grade. He had the next best grade with an A, right? He drafted a lot like I did. He hit on running backs. He hit on wide receivers. He hit on tight ends. He waited all the way to get J.J. McCarthy late in the draft, and now he is super kicking himself, and he's 0-2. So he needs help, and I don't wait super, super long for quarterbacks, and this is a reason. Once I started seeing like the Herberts and the Purdys, I'm like, maybe I should get a quarterback, and maybe I'm willing to reach a little bit. And this is the reason why, because when you were stuck with J.J. McCarthy, look at what the situation you're in now. He's out 2 to 4 weeks. You got Carson Wentz. You're going to plug Carson Wentz in. Coach Common's actually starting Carson Wentz this week, and I would not feel confident at all starting Carson Wentz this week.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't trust Carson Wentz at all. I will say, though, some guys have obviously performed better than others, right? Mac Jones had a wonderful week last week. Jake Browning probably going to be successful again. And you got to remember, too, that this isn't a guy who – is just coming up off the practice squad or something like that. And he's been on the team. He's been in NFL action last season 2 seasons ago. So, when Jake Browning is starting, I don't feel like the Bengals offense is going to miss a beat.
Right. All right, Otis, that's really all I have for week 3. Good luck to you. Like we were talking about earlier, a lot of people are sitting at 2-0. You feel confident at 2-0. If you're sitting at 0-2, you're still early enough to rebound. Can't wait till we can hit on the bye week. The bye weeks, it gets tough.
Oh yeah. So when we're in 2 weeks, we'll be a week away when we come into it next week. And the bye weeks are the snag, right? Like if you're one of them teams next week that's 1-2 or 0-3, it's going to be really tough sledding if you have a week now in that bye week where you had 3 or 4 guys that are out of your lineup. So that's going to be really tough to navigate. Got to watch those bye week landmines.
And if we can just have a moment of silence for Joe Burrow's toe. If you drafted Joe Burrow high, especially first or second round, it's going to be tough sledding for you right now. You definitely are going to have to hit that waiver wire, and crazy to see a big stud like Joe go down, because you are definitely going to be scrambling, especially if you're in a thin quarterback league. You are going to be scrambling to plug someone into that quarterback spot.
Yeah, if you're in a 14-man league, even a 12-man league, it's going to be really tight. You might want to think about trading one of your other big pieces for, a mid quarterback and a mid receiver or a mid running back, just to get, yourself back to good, because you're not getting Joe Burrow back probably the rest of the season, to be honest, because I don't know how well Jake Browning's going to do as far as winning football games. I'm hoping that he can win some fantasy leagues, though.
Yeah, I looked more into that turf toe. If you're getting surgery on that turf toe, it is not going to be good. It feels like you're walking on glass, is what I've been told.
Yeah, I mean, I've never experienced that as a player, but
Right.
I can't imagine it feeling good if he's out 3 months and had to have surgery.
Yep. So, all right, Otis, that's all I got for this week.
All right, buddy. If you want to talk about kickers real quick, always go with my advice: pick a Denver kicker or a dome kicker. Other than that, thanks for listening to the Not Move Fantasy Football Podcast, where stats become stories.
This non-casual podcast may not be reproduced, retransmitted, or reused without the authorized written consent of the Not Move Podcast Network. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.